Okay, so now d4 by Andrey. He strikes in the center, a very aggressive approach in the Petrov defense, going for the modern attack. And after that, VE captures on e4, and usually white would mirror the position with the knight takes e5, but Andrey goes for queen to e2. He immediately attacks the knight and eyes the open e file. So now to defend the knight, he simply pushed d5. Okay, so now Esipenko develops the knight. He's simply putting pressure on d5 pawn, but simply knight to f5. Simply Wei centralizes the knight, eyeing the e4 pawn. So to defend this, queen to f2. And after that, Wei simply castles and bishop to f4. And you can see what he's preparing for. And guys, here Wei pushed f6. He simply, kicks the knight back. But guys, let me go back to the move bishop to f4. And here, black can also consider this aggressive line c5. Just trying to open up the center. But what if white just takes? And if this happens, now comes queen to a5, putting some pressure over the pawn as well as also pinning the knight. And if now white decides to castle long, knight to c6, okay? And if knight takes c6, b takes c6. And if g4, if he continues to attack the knight, but simply bishop to c5, bishop takes c5, simply attacking the queen. So now the queen has to move. So let's suppose if queen to d2, and after that finally knight to d4, attacking f3 as well as preparing knight to e6, which is going to target this active bishop. And clearly you can see here black is doing great. But in the game, after the move f6, knight to d3, and after he defends the knight, knight to c6. And as you can see, both knights are looking really strong, putting pressure on the d4 pawn. And here Andrey defends his knight on e2, a good move. He's preparing basically to push c3 so that he can solidify the center. And maybe c4 is also coming later to undermine that d5 pawn. But guys, knight to b4, threatening knight takes c2 fork. So that's why knight takes b4. Esipenko simply exchanges the knight, but bishop takes b4 check. And guys, now I have a question for you. How would you defend this check? And now, as we all know, there are two ways to do this. And if you think logically, I think most of you would definitely go for knight to c3. But guys, in reality, guys, this move is a mistake, because now comes rook to e8 check, taking benefit of this open file. But what's the problem? I mean, simply bishop to e2, and in the next move, white is going to castle, getting the king safe. But guys, now black can consider this amazing move c5. And the idea is, if d takes c5, and that's the plan, so that he can deflect the pawn, but simply queen to a5, creating excess pressure on the knight. And again, guys, now I have a question, that why doesn't white go for short castling in this position? Let me know in the comments. And let's suppose if white decides to castle alongside, so that he can simply get out of the spin. But what about bishop takes c3, b takes c3, queen takes c3, and you can see here black successfully breached the safety of white king. And in the next move, this check is coming, which clearly makes this position winning for black. Okay, so in the actual game, after bishop takes b4 check, yeah, so that's why here Andrey defends the check with the move c3. And it also challenges the bishop. And since this bishop is attacked, so that's why Wei just brings it back on d6, asking for bishop exchange, But guys, in this position, Esipenko makes a mistake with bishop to d2. He simply wants to keep the bishop pair, but guys, he's also moving a developed piece again. Let me go back to the move bishop to d6 instead of bishop to d2. In this position, the best move for white is to castle long side. I mean, this was the time to castle. And let's suppose if white continues with rook to e8, the idea is to sack the rook on e2 so that he can remove a defender of this bishop on f4. So that's why if bishop takes d6, simply queen takes d6. Okay, and if knight to g3, if he targets this active knight, but bishop to d7, so that he can also bring the other rook into the game. But before that, bishop to d3. What if he tries to put more pressure over the knight on f5? But what about queen to f4 check? And if rook to d2, simply knight to e3. And now look at this knight on e3. I mean, it's covering the important key squares. And let's suppose if white decides to bring the knight to e2, so that he can target the queen, but simply queen to h6. Okay, and if g3, in the next move you can see knight to f4 is coming, which makes the position very solid for white. But also look at the knight on e3. I mean, it's also just amazing, targeting the key squares in the white position. So I mean, in this position you can see both sides are doing great. Okay, so in the game, after the move bishop to d2, yeah, so basically here simply queen to e8, and guys, Wei Yi immediately spots the weakness. The white king is still in the center, and now this queen is ready to swing over a4. And guys, again, I have a question for you, that how would you counter this move? Because one thing is clear, that pushing the pawn to b3 would be bad for white, because as it also weaken the pawn structure. Okay, so the another move which comes in our mind is to castle long. But guys, now this move is even worse. I mean, queen to a4 is still coming anyway. And just look at this. The a2 pawn is hanging, and obviously you can't slide the king to b1 because of this undefended rook. So what's the best move? And guys, in this position, the best move for white is to push c4. The idea is, if queen takes so basically the idea is, let's suppose if queen takes a2, yeah okay, so let me go back. Yeah, so basically in this position, if you can see, if queen takes c4, then white can defend the check with knight to c3, which also open the diagonal of this for this light square bishop, which targets the queen. And let's suppose if now queen takes a2, now comes knight to c3, okay, attacking the queen. So that's why, let's suppose if queen to a1 check, king to c2. And guys, since this knight on c3 is now covering the a4 square, so black can't give a check from there. So that's why now this queen has to go back, because this rook was also attacking. So now c5, and you can see now this bishop is attacked. And now just take a look at this position. Wei Yi is absolutely dominating the board, neutralizing. So basically Esipenko is now dominating the board, simply neutralizing all of the attack of black. So okay, so guys, that's a variation, but let's go back to our game. After the move, which is queen to e8, here, that's why basically Esipenko finds the best move. The idea is, after Wei Yi gives a check, obviously this pawn push will be bad, so simply king to c1. And now you can see there is no way left for black to continue the attack, because the king on c1 is now completely safe. And we and also, so now to continue the attack, he pushed b5. He's and You can see what he's preparing for. So, but knight to f4. Andrey brings his knight into the attack, and now he's eyeing the d5 pawn and also the e6 square, which is crucial. So c5, and Wei Yi, strikes back in the center, and he wants to break open the c file and the center before white can consolidate. And guys, now bishop to c2. Andrey simply attacks the queen, trying to gain a tempo. So that's why this queen has to go back. So Wei Yi just put it back on a6. And now and yeah, so basically now Esipenko takes on d4, but bishop to d7, preparing to bring this rook in the c file. So that's why he simply slides the king to b1, but rook at a goes to c8. And guys, now this pawn on d5 is free. So let's see what will happen if Esipenko tries to capture this pawn. And guys, in reality, if this happens, then it will be completely over for white. I mean, can you spot the next move which black can play in this position? And guys, in this position, black can actually go for this crazy move, rook takes c2. The idea is if king takes c2, yeah, so the move is not to give a check because then this king will escape on b1, but it is to push b4, opening the diagonal of the queen. And in the next move, this rook to c8 check is coming. So that's why if after the king goes there, then you can see we can give a check. So let's suppose to defend this, if he pushed b3, simply creating an escaping square for the king. But now comes queen to c6 check, attacking the king as well as the knight. So after this king goes on b2, simply queen takes d5, and now just look at this. The white king is completely naked and the black is threatening all sorts of deadly attacks. So that's why after rook at a goes to c8, he goes for bishop to d3. He simply pins the pawn on d5 so that black can't push. But guys, now comes the most interesting part of this game. I mean, in this position, Wei Yi shocked the chess world by sacrificing the rook by rook to c4. He just wants to break open the white king. I mean, let's suppose if white decides to capture the rook by bishop takes c4, and guys, if this happens, simply d takes c4, and now you can see black has a dangerous passed pawn on c4. And you can see also this b5 pawn is ready to roll. And guys, let's suppose if he tries to stop by a3, simply queen to a4, taking benefit of the weak potholes. And guys, let's suppose if white decides to bring his another rook on c1, so that in the next move he can cover the second rank. But guys, in this position, now comes this another crazy move, which is knight takes d4. And if white now captures the knight by queen takes d4, simply bishop to f5 check. And obviously this king can't go to a2 due to the threat of queen to b3 mate. And also he can't defend the check with the rook due to the threat of queen takes rook. So that's why the only move left is queen to e4, completely giving up the queen. And after takes, and yeah, you can see now it's all over. So that's why after rook to c4, let me go back. So here Andrey simply declines the sacrifice and he goes for knight to e2. He also brings the knight to the defense, and guys, as you can see, this rook is still attacked, but still Wei Yi ignores that and he goes for the brilliant move number 2, which is knight to e7. And guys, this is just insane. Wei is playing like a man possessed, and obviously still white can't capture the rook due to the same threat which I mentioned earlier. I mean the threat of these pawns. So that's why Esipenko goes for g4. He starts the kingside expansion, and guys, now can and guys, you can see now black can continue the game in this position with the move f5, just trying to open up the f file. The idea is if bishop takes c4, simply d takes c4, and now you can see black has a steamroller of pawns on the queen side. And if queen to e1, if he tries to cover the important square so that white pawns can't enter. But what about takes, and as you can see now this f file is opened. But before that, bishop takes g4, and if rook to f1, and now to disrupt the white structure, black can consider this crazy move c3. And let's suppose if white decides to exchange the rook by rook takes f8 check, king takes f8 so that he can reduce some pressure, but simply knight takes c3. Okay, and but what about b4, attacking the knight again? And after this knight goes to e4, simply queen to d3 check, king to c1, queen to c4 check, king to b1, bishop to f5, pinning the knight, and you can see now there is no escape for the white king. But in the game, after the move g4, in this position here, Wei Yi goes for rook at f goes to c8, and you can see now now both rooks are on the c file, and the walls are closing, and basically the walls are closing in on the white king. Okay, so now Andrey tries to create some counterplay by pushing by h4 on the king side, but guys, this is too slow because of the move b4. Wei Yi just keeps pushing. He completely ignores the rook and goes for the kill. And now b3. And basically Esipenko just tries to, attack the rook again. But guys, now comes the most, interesting move of this game, which is bishop to b5. And guys, what a move. And just take a look at this rook. I mean, it's still on its original square from move number 22, and it's still, completely untouched. The idea is if b takes c4, bishop takes c4, and now just take a look at this bishop on c4. It's an absolute monster, putting excess pressure over the white king. And to reduce some amount of pressure, if white decides to exchange the bishop by, let's suppose, bishop takes c4, simply queen takes c4. And guys, in reality, it won't reduce the pressure. In fact, it will make it even worse. And now black is threatening mate on c2. So to defend this, if rook to c1, it is not going to work because of the check by queen to d3. And after king to b2, queen takes d2 check, king to b3, queen to d3 check, king to b2, queen to a3 check, and king to b1. And you can see white is now completely lost. Okay, so in the game, after bishop takes c4, here Andrey goes for bishop to c2. He's basically desperately trying to, block the file, but simply bishop to d3. And guys, this is the final nail in the coffin by Wei Yi. Basically, he's just he's just, improving his pieces. And now just take a look at this bishop on d3. I mean, it's the real king of the game. And I know some of you are thinking about sliding this king to c1 so that he can get away from this pin, but simply rook takes c2 check, and after king to d1, b3, and you can see the pawn is now just unstoppable. And obviously white also can't capture due to this undefended rook. Okay, so in the game, after bishop to d3, bishop to c3, basically Andrey just trying to block the b file, but guys, now it is too late because Wei Yi simply captures on c3. He simply opens the b file, and now you can see this rook is ready to roll in. But knight to c1, and Andrey, just tries, and he's basically trying to defend the b3 square. But Wei Yi has one final thunderbolt, which is rook to b8 check. And in this position, Andrey Esipenko resigned. Because let's suppose if this game continues like knight to b3, so that he can cover, but simply queen to a3, threatening mate in 1. So to stop this, now bishop takes d3 is forced so that he can cover the b2 square by the queen. But guys, now I just want you all to pause the video, and can you guess the final blow in this position which black can play? And guys, if you find the move rook takes b3, then congratulations, you are a genius. The idea is after a takes b3, simply queen takes b3 check, king to c1, bishop to f4 check, queen to d2, and in this position the final blow will be c takes d2. And guys, just look at this pawn mate. I mean, that's amazing. What an absolute brilliant, crushing and fearless game by Wei Yi. I mean, just look at this. He sacrifices the material multiple times just to keep the white king trapped. This is a masterpiece of an attack. Like this video and I will see you in the next one. This is your host Bye Sun signing off. Bye bye.